Okay, so this video is going to be a presentation of about watersheds. What I would like you to do during this video, just as we have done in previous videos, is I would like you to listen and follow along and fill in the blanks where appropriate on your handout. So in this video, what we're going to learn about is we're going to do a quick review of the definition of a watershed. We're going to look at common land use categories, so how is land used. We're going to look at two specific types and sources of pollutants, which include nutrient pollutants and sedimentary pollutants. Then we're going to look at the impacts of those pollutants. So how does it impact the watershed itself and everything in that watershed? We're going to discuss something called pollution units or PUs and pollution loads. And then finally, we're going to look at how Saskatchewan, or what organization in Saskatchewan, plays a role in protecting our watersheds. So, what is a watershed? As we discussed previously in previous classes, a watershed is an area of land that drains to a particular lake, wetland, or stream. So it is a common outlet, such as a lake, it has a common outlet, such as a lake, stream, or wetland. So that star right there is the common outlet that this watershed has. Each lake, stream, or wetland has its own watershed. The boundary of a watershed is defined by the highest elevations surrounded by the body of water. So a drop of water falling outside of that boundary will drain to another watershed. Everything that happens on the land in the watershed can impact its water. We touched on this briefly before. Everyone lives in a watershed. So natural or undeveloped watersheds have natural ways to use, store, and filter rainwater. So in a watershed that remains covered with natural vegetation, including forests, wetlands, streams, and lakes, and grasslands, most of the rainfall that hits the lands is slowly soaked up by vegetation to support growth, with some of it evaporating back into the atmosphere. What water does enter the soil is filtered by natural soil processes as it soaks into the ground, helping to lock up the excess phosphorus, sediment, and other substances. This water then becomes the groundwater that helps keep many lakes and streams cooler in the summer. Sorry, I'm just going to go back there. Another way that land soaks up water is by storing it in wetlands, like the forested wetland and the bog in this picture. Wetlands act as sponges, holding water temporarily. This gradual process, in which much of the water soaks back into the ground, is removed by vegetation or is stored in wetland, helps protect the land from erosion or flooding. In naturally vegetated watersheds, studies show that roughly 50% of typical rainfall soaks into the ground and about 40% ends back in the atmosphere where surrounding vegetation growth, leaving only 10% of that rainfall flowing slowly across that land. Now we're going to look at common land use categories. Sorry, I'm going backwards, so let's try that again. All right, here we go. So when we develop land for human use, we remove natural vegetation and add buildings, roads, and other structures. We add chemicals such as fertilizers, and in many cases, in many other ways, we change the natural landscape. Common ways that we use the land, such as farming, industry, urban areas, forestry, towns, and villages, each have their own impact on water quality. So for example, the paved roads compacted ground and rooftops of urban areas keep water from soaking slowly into the ground and leaving it to run across the land. So now we're going to compare this developed land from undeveloped land. So this is the same watershed we looked at before, but now with a farm, a city, and parking lots where there used to be trees and wetlands. Now, when it rains, the rain will hit the urban areas and flow across the parking lots and expose soil to the farm. Much less of it soaks back into the ground or gets stored in the wetlands. Because there is more water staying on the land's surface and because there's less vegetation to soak it up, there's much more water flowing much more quickly across the land. This quickly moving water takes exposed soil, fertilizer, pollutants, and other unwelcomed materials to the watersheds, lakes, wetlands, and streams. And all the water moving so quickly can cause flooding. Because so much water stays on the land's surface, much less is filtered through the soil to resupply the groundwater. The surface water flowing across the parking lot and rooftops can be heated by the sun, resulting in lakes and streams that are too warm. In developed watersheds with a mixture of land uses, studies show that about 50% of typical rainfalls flow quickly over the land, with only about 10% soaking into the ground. So this is the reverse of undeveloped land. So potential impacts of human activities on the land. The activity that will follow this, or we potentially will be doing later, is called the watershed game, and it only focuses on sediment from erosion and nutrients like phosphorus. But there are many other pollutants and problems that can result from the ways that we use the land. So, water flowing too fast. Water flowing too fast can erode soil, uproot plants, and change fish and invertebrate habitats. Too much water. Too much water in the form of flooding causes property damage and changes habitats. Nutrients and bacteria. Runoff over lands and hard surfaces impacted by fertilizers, human and/or animal waste, and other sources can contribute to excess nutrients, primarily nitrogen and phosphorus, and potentially harmful bacteria to the waterways. Road salt and other pollutants. Pollutants including road salt, gasoline, metals, and other substances deposited on hard surfaces such as roadways can be flushed into the local waterways. Erosion. Large volumes of quickly moving water can erode sensitive lands and streams and lake banks. Sediment. Sediment from erosion, road, and other construction and other sources can impact waterways and smother habitats. Although sediment and phosphorus can be considered pollutants, when they're in excess, it is important to stress that both are essential to healthy environments. So now we're going to look at the role sediment and nutrients play in healthy environments. So, sediment. Before we talk about sediment and phosphorus as pollutions, it's really important to understand and stress that they're good for us and the environment under natural conditions. So sediment, it is natural for some erosion and sedimentation to occur. Nutrients ride along this sediment, leaving places like river deltas where a lot of sediment gets deposited, rich in nutrients. So basically, as the sediment goes and it settles on sides of rivers or lakes, it provides nutrients to those lakes and rivers. Nutrients. So nitrogen and phosphorus are essential for all life. So for example, phosphorus is the second most abundant mineral in the human body and is essential for strong bones. Nitrogen and phosphorus are both essential to DNA. So, when are sediments and phosphorus pollutants? Sediments and phosphorus are pollutants when they enter the bodies of water in much higher concentrations that would happen naturally in an undeveloped watershed than would happen in an undeveloped watershed. Where do they come from? Well, when we talk about sediment, we are referring to fine soil and sand that enters water bodies from erosion in the watershed. So as you can see in these pictures, looks like there's a construction area here that a lot of water would run off to and pick up that sediment as it goes. As flooding occurs, sedimentation can also happen. Erosion can break down natural riverbanks, and we get sedimentation there as well. So nutrients. So phosphorus. We're going to focus on phosphorus in this slide, or in this presentation, pardon me. The two main nutrients we are connected to, or we are concerned about, are nitrogen and phosphorus. So in this case, phosphorus contributes mainly through fertilizer and human and animal wastes. So that's where the phosphorus comes from in our watershed. Phosphorus as a pollutant. Phosphorus is sticky. It sticks to soil particles. So think of the ball in this picture as being the phosphate molecule, and the Velcro paddles being the soil particles. The molecule from the phosphorus takes in the water and binds easily to clay and other soil particles that make up sediment. This is important because any time that sediment is getting into waterways, it also has phosphorus hitchhiking along. Controlling excess sediment and keeping it away from lakes, wetland, and streams also help reduce excess phosphorus. Too much phosphorus is like a banquet table for aquatic plants and algae and can lead to excessive growth. Though nitrogen is also needed for plant growth, it usually is more plentiful than phosphorus in fresh water. It doesn't take much phosphorus to cause a lot of green stuff to grow in waterways. So 1 pound of phosphorus equals 5 pounds of algae. So why is too much phosphorus a problem? There is a name for the addition of excess nutrients to lakes or rivers that lead to excess plant growth. This process is called eutrophication. Sorry, it's a big word. Common symptoms of eutrophication include too much plant and algae growth. So some types of algae that do well in eutrophic conditions can be toxic to humans and animals. Another symptom would be lots of water clarity caused by algae, loss of water clarity caused by algae, loss of dissolved oxygen caused by decomposing plants and animal matter, and by plant respiration, loss of habitat and aquatic life, and water is not suitable for swimming, drinking, or fish. So what do the numbers mean? It doesn't take a lot of added phosphorus to cause lakes to become eutrophic. Once a lake reaches about 200 parts per billion, scientists consider it eutrophic. 1 part per billion is equivalent to 1 square of toilet paper in a roll that stretches from New York to London. So that's not actually a very large amount. When we add phosphorus to the land as fertilizer or as manure, what we add is at least 1,000 times more concentrated than lake water. Too much sediment. So, what are the impacts of sediment? Phosphorus, as we talked about before, hitchhikes along sediment, feeding algae growth. Too much sediment makes the water cloudy. It reduces the amount of sunlight available to native aquatic plants, which takes away habitat for larvae fish and aquatic invertebrates. It makes it harder for visual feeders like some fish to find food, and it can clog the gills of fish. When sediment embeds on the bottom of lakes, streams, or rivers, it settles out of the water. Excess sediment can clog lakes or stream bottoms, covering over fish spawning areas and reducing aquatic invertebrate habitats. So what do the numbers mean with sediment? As the slide shows, it does not take a lot of sediment to start to have an impact on fish. The figure in this slide shows vials with different concentrations of sediment suspended in clay in them. At only 10 NTUs of turbidity, not very cloudy looking to us, fish can start to act stressed, and impacts get more severe as sediment concentration goes up. So basically, the more sediment in the water, the cloudier the water gets, and the higher the impact on the fish that live there. So turbidity is the cloudiness or haziness of the water caused by a large number of very small particles. Most of them are invisible to our eyes. So think about being caught in a dust storm or trying to breathe. That's what fish are experiencing in high turbidity water. Turbidity can be caused by any kind of particle that interferes with light transmission, but is often used to estimate how much sediment is in water. A more direct way to measure sediment in water is the total suspended sediment, but it is also the most time-consuming. When we talk about these NTUs stand for nephelometric turbidity units, which is how the instrument used to measure turbidity reports the relative amounts of turbidity. So, less scientific, how cloudy the water is what turbidity means. All right, so looking at pollution units, or PUs, and pollution load. Scientists and managers determine how much pollution is contributed by land use practices and how much can be reduced in two ways, depending on what type of practice is being studied and managed. So in some cases, it makes sense to look at concentration of a particular pollutant. For example, knowing the concentration of phosphorus in water sample helps us predict where and when there might be an algal bloom. In other cases, it is more important to look at the total pollutant load to a particular lake or stream. So for example, knowing how many tons of sediment have been transported to a particular lake and stream can help guide restoration. So concentration, pollutant concentration, how strong it is. Total pollutant load is how much over time. So in the States, they have an act that tells different government organizations how and what they need to do to protect the water. In Canada, well, in Saskatchewan specifically, we have an organization called the Saskatchewan Watershed Security Agency, and it's their job to protect our watersheds. Their role, some of the roles that they play are to manage the province's water supply, protect the water quality, ensure safe drinking water and the treatment of wastewater. They own and manage 49 dams and related water supply channels. They reduce flood and drought damage. They protect aquatic habitat and provide information about water. So the Watershed Security Agency works with a variety of other organizations to help ensure that our Saskatchewan watersheds are safe and clean and as pollution-free as possible. Now that we're finished going through the video, what I would like you to do is I would like you to go to this second link or second video, the YouTube video. It's called Nutrient Pollution. Just as a review, watch the video and answer the questions on your handout as a good review in terms of what nutrient pollution is.